Section 23 of The Schoolmaster and Other Stories by Anton Chekhov. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by William Tomko. The Schoolmaster and Other Stories by Anton Chekhov. Section 23. A Tripping Tongue. Natalia Mihalovna, a young married lady who had arrived in the morning from Yalta, was having her dinner, and in a never-ceasing flow of babble was telling her husband of all the charms of the Crimea. Her husband, delighted, gazed tenderly at her enthusiastic face, listened, and from time to time put in a question. "But they say living is dreadfully expensive there?" he asked, among other things. "Well, what shall I say? To my thinking, this talk of its being so expensive is exaggerated, hubby. The devil is not as black as he is painted. Yulia Petrovna and I, for instance, had very decent and comfortable rooms for 20 roubles a day. Everything depends on knowing how to do things, my dear. Of course, if you want to go up into the mountains, to Petri, for instance, if you take a horse, a guide, then of course it does come to something. It's awful what it comes to. But, Vasichka, the mountains there, imagine, high, high mountains, 1,000 times higher than the church. At the top, mist, mist, mist. At the bottom, enormous stones, stones, stones. And pines. Ah, I can't bear to think of it. By the way, I read about those Tatar guides there, in some magazine while you were away. Such abominable stories. Tell me, is there really anything out of the way about them?" Natalia Mihalovna made a little disdainful grimace and shook her head. "Just ordinary Tatars, nothing special," she said, "though indeed I only had a glimpse of them in the distance. They were pointed out to me, but I did not take much notice of them. You know, hubby, I always had a prejudice against all such Circassians, Greeks, Moors. They are said to be terrible Don Juans. Perhaps there are shameless creatures who—" Natalia Mihalovna suddenly jumped up from her chair as though she had thought of something dreadful. For half a minute she looked with frightened eyes at her husband, and said, accentuating each word, "Vasichka, I say, the immoral women there are in the world. Ah, how immoral! And it's not as though they were working-class or middle-class people, but aristocratic ladies, priding themselves on their bon ton. It was simply awful. I could not believe my own eyes. I shall remember it as long as I live. To think that people can forget themselves to such a point as— Ah, Vasichka, I don't like to speak of it. Take my companion, Yulia Petrovna, for example. Such a good husband, 2 children. She moves in a decent circle, always poses as a saint. And all at once, would you believe it, only hubby, of course this is entre nous, give me your word of honor you won't tell a soul." "What next? Of course I won't tell." "Honor bright? Mind now, I trust you." The little lady put down her fork, assumed a mysterious air, and whispered, "Imagine a thing like this. That Yulia Petrovna rode up into the mountains. It was glorious weather. She rode on ahead with her guide. I was a little behind. We had ridden 2 or 3 miles. All at once, only fancy, Vasichka, Yulia cried out and clutched at her bosom. Her Tatar put his arm around her waist, or she would have fallen off the saddle. I rode up to her with my guide. 'What is it? What is the matter?' 'Oh,' she cried, 'I am dying. I feel faint. I can't go any further.' Fancy my alarm. 'Let us go back then,' I said. 'No, Natalie,' she said, 'I can't go back. I shall die of pain if I move another step. I have spasms.' And she prayed and besought my Suleiman and me to ride back to the town and fetch her some of her drops, which always do her good." "Stay, I don't quite understand you," muttered the husband, scratching his forehead. "You said just now that you had only seen those Tatars from a distance, and now you are talking of some Suleiman. There, you are finding fault again, The lady pouted, not in the least disconcerted. "I can't endure suspiciousness. I can't endure it. It's stupid, stupid. I am not finding fault, but why say what is not true? If you rode about with Tatars, so be it. God bless you. But why shuffle about it?" You are a queer one," cried the lady, revolted. "He is jealous of Suleiman, as though one could ride up into the mountains without a guide. I should like to see you do it. If you don't know the ways there, if you don't understand, you had better hold your tongue. Yes, hold your tongue. You can't take a step there without a guide." "So it seems." "None of your silly grins, if you please. I am not Yulia. I don't justify her, but though I don't pose as a saint, I don't forget myself to that degree. My Suleiman never overstepped the limits." "No, Mamutkul used to be sitting at Yulia's all day long, but in my room as soon as it struck 11, 'Suleiman, march! Off you go!' and my foolish Tatar boy would depart. I made him mind his P's and Q's, hubby. As soon as he began grumbling about money or anything, I would say, 'How? What? What?' and his heart would be in his mouth directly. Ha ha ha! His eyes, you know, Vassitchka, were as black, like coals. Such an amusing little Tatar face. So funny and silly. I kept him in order, didn't I just?" "I can fancy," mumbled her husband, rolling up pellets of bread. "That's stupid, Vassitchka. I know what is in your mind. I know what you are thinking. But I assure you, even when we were on our expeditions, I never let him overstep the limits. For instance, if we rode to the mountains or to the Yu Chansu waterfall, I would always say to him, 'Suleiman, ride behind. Do you hear?' And he always rode behind, poor boy. Even at the most dramatic moments I would say to him, 'Still, you must not forget that you are only a Tatar and I am the wife of a civil councillor.' Ha ha!" The little lady laughed, then, looking around her quickly and assuming an alarmed expression, whispered, "But Yulia! Oh, that Yulia! I quite see, Vassitchka, there is no reason why one shouldn't have a little fun, a little rest from the emptiness of conventional life. That's all right, have your fling by all means, no one will blame you. But to take the thing seriously, to get up scenes, no, say what you like, I cannot understand that. Just fancy, she was jealous. Wasn't that silly? One day Mamutkul, her grande passion, came to see her. She was not at home. Well, I asked him into my room. There was conversation, one thing and another. They're awfully amusing, you know. The evening passed without our noticing it. All at once Yulia rushed in. She flew at me and at Mamutkul, made such a scene. Fie! I can't understand that sort of thing, Vassitchka." Vassitchka cleared his throat, frowned and walked up and down the room. "You had a gay time there, I must say," he growled with a disdainful smile. "How stupid that is!" cried Natalia Mihalovna, offended. "I know what you are thinking about. You always have such horrid ideas. I won't tell you anything. No, I won't." The lady pouted and said no more. End of Section 23. Recording by William Tomko.